What are some common mistakes you see people making when it comes to creating and sticking to that budget?
I think the biggest one people make is like being too restrictive. If your grocery budget is $1,000 a month and now all of a sudden you want to start budgeting and you're like, well, it could be like $200 a month, you're going to set yourself up for failure, and it's not going to feel good when you go over that $200 mark. But that's not realistic for you or your family. You want to challenge yourself, but you don't want to not be realistic. It would be maybe something like $800 instead of $1,000. You don't want to even cutting it in half would be a lot. But I think that's where that's the first mistake I typically see is people are way too restrictive with their budget. Maybe there's someone who goes out to get Starbucks every day, and maybe you don't need it every day, but maybe you get it once a week as a treat. Don't completely cut it out, because you're more likely to just drive through the drive-through when you drive by one day because you can't take it anymore.
That's so true. I think when we were first starting to budget together as a married couple, it was very helpful to know that the first couple months they told us in the class that we took that, hey, this is going to go bad. This is actually going to cause conflict for the first 3 months. Just consider it your revving up to doing it correctly later.
Yeah, for sure. So besides being restrictive, also not being realistic enough. If you have a family that is on the go all the time, you and your husband work full time, you have kids in sports and schools and whatnot, and you're out running errands and stuff all the time, by saying you'll never eat out, that's not realistic. You're going to have to eat out. There are days you can set the crock pot and make meals and have whatever, but you have to have some sanity. You can't just hope that dinner is magically made every night and then run yourself ragged. That's also not healthy and not going to make you look back on your budgeting, that time you were budgeting, as a good thing. It's going to seem very negative.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are two really good tips. Okay, so first is too restrictive. Second is not realistic. Mm-hmm. What's the third?
Not being creative enough.
Wait, creativity and budget? That does not sound like two things that go together.
Right? It's true. People don't think outside the box enough. So if you have some sort of thing that you're good at, besides using that as a side hustle, you can also use it for trade. So right now I trade with one of my neighbors, and she does my hair. So I pay $0 to get my hair done all year long. And that's typically something that costs at least $100 every time you go in. My sister, she's a massage therapist. She just traded last week with someone who does tattoos and got a new tattoo. There are all sorts of ways that you can get creative. You can trade for babysitting. A crazy thing my husband and I are doing now is we have 2 paid off SUVs, and we are selling both of our vehicles, and we are downgrading, which is the opposite of what most people are doing. Most people are trying to figure out how to get a nicer car. We're how do we get a worse car so we can use that money and invest it? It's just not something people think about typically.
Okay, that's really interesting. I like the creativity with the budget because that makes it a game.
Yeah, for sure. And it's crazy what one person thinks of versus what another person thinks of. My idea of being creative is going to be completely different than my husband's. My husband's is he'll watch YouTube videos to figure out how to do some sort of crazy house project so we don't have to call in a professional. And that's his way of being creative and saving the budget.
That's definitely, my husband's in engineering also. That's definitely an engineer's mindset.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out the technicality, the details of this project, and I'm going to execute it with precision. But yes, it's so helpful. My husband does the same thing with YouTube, so I appreciate that a lot. I wanted to ask you about a sinking fund. You said in one of your videos that was not something that people typically are familiar with, and I wasn't familiar with it till I took a financial class. Can you explain how that works and how people can make their own sinking fund?
Yeah, so sinking fund is essentially kind of like a future purchase or something that that's going to happen in the future. and you kind of divvy it out and you set aside money every month or every paycheck, however you want to do that. A lot of people do it for things like car maintenance, like your car tabs and your oil changes, and you might need new tires this year, and you kind of just like break it out in the amount of months that you want to save for it, and set aside that money each month. Some people do it in cash, some people do it online, some people open multiple bank accounts. You can kind of do it however you want. You could do it if you're saving for like a new car. Some of the sinking funds I have, the current one I have is for preschool, because my little one's going to preschool in the fall and it's kind of expensive and I didn't want to do that upfront cost every month. So I started doing it in January instead. You could literally do it for anything, a new cell phone.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like you're almost like a credit card payment, but to yourself.
Interest-free.
Interest-free.